No one wanted to go near the poisoned alien girl, except the fearless Earth soldier. They called her the most dangerous bioweapon in the galaxy, a girl who could wipe out billions just by feeling something. So why was I the only one who wasn't afraid to stand near her? And why, after everything, do I still hear her voice every time it rains? I've never been the kind of guy who believes in fate, but sometimes one moment, just one, defines your entire life. For me, that moment came in the middle of a blood-soaked battlefield, the day I touched what everyone else called death incarnate. Let me take you back to the final battle on planet Erebus. Not because it's where I almost died, but because it's where I truly started living. I remember it like it was yesterday, the scorched metal stench of burnt titanium, starship wreckage scattered like the bones of titans, thick black smoke curling through a violet sky. And right there, in the middle of the ruins, something was kneeling. No, someone. Her skin was a pale, ghostly blue, faintly glowing under the ash. Cracks ran up her arms like fractured glass, and from those fractures, a soft violet mist bled into the air. Her eyes, they weren't like any eyes I'd ever seen. They looked ancient, deeper than the cosmos itself. "Biohazard! Fall back immediately!" The scream in my comm snapped me back. Around me, soldiers were retreating, fumbling to seal their masks, some even dropping their rifles and running for their lives. But I didn't move. There was something about her. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something strange, something pulling at me. I stepped forward, one step, then another, while everyone else was backing away. I've never known fear, not once in my life. I always thought that was my greatest strength. It's what kept me alive through 7 brutal years on the Orion frontier, where only the reckless or the damned dared to fight. But I was wrong. Fearlessness wasn't my strength, not until I met her. When I got close enough, I saw them, tears just floating there on her cheeks like suspended crystals. Every drop shimmered with colors I didn't even know existed. I dropped to one knee and without thinking reached out a hand. She looked up, eyes wide, stunned. And then, barely a whisper, she said, "Step back. I don't want you to die." In perfect English, clear, software, human. And in that moment, something cracked open inside me. Not because she spoke my language, but because even hunted, even feared, the first thing she cared about was me. Right then and there, I knew my life would never be the same. But I should probably start from the beginning, before I became the first man to touch walking death and live. They called me Dead Man's Shadow, the shadow of death, a name I earned after coming back from Hawthorne Delta. Nobody else made it out of that mission alive. I never liked the nickname, but in the mercenary world, reputation can matter more than skill. Erebus was supposed to be just another job. Recon only, they told me. In, scan, out, simple. There was nothing simple about Erebus. Everyone in the coalition knew the name, Omega-level biohazard zone. Even military elites wouldn't set foot there. So they called people like me, the kind who'll die for a paycheck. "Treat it like a one-way trip," Commander Wilson said as he handed me the file. "No one's ever come back to tell us what happened down there." I still remember flipping through that file in the landing bay. Erebus used to be the crown jewel of Hesperan science, a frontier research hub run by one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. They rewrote DNA, engineered new life forms, until the day it all went dark. They called it the unbinding. No one knows exactly what happened, just that all contact with Erebus ceased. Rescue ships found nothing but a poisoned atmosphere. No comms, no signs of life, just silence. No one came back to tell the story. Wilson said that line like a prayer as I loaded up my gear. "Don't be a hero. If anything feels off, pull out." Erebus. In ancient Earth myth, Erebus was the god of primordial darkness, born of chaos itself. Fitting name for a planet that became the tomb of an entire civilization. As my dropship approached orbit, I couldn't help but stare. From space, Erebus looked like a swirling marble of violet and ash. A world wrapped in thick gray fog, completely lightless. No cities, no beacons, no signs of life, just the quiet dread of a dead world. I landed in the middle of an ion storm, interference everywhere, instruments glitching. But the moment my boots hit the ground, something strange happened. My comms crackled to life. A signal, unencrypted, no ID tag, just a voice, faint, broken through on static. "She's still alive." 3 words that changed everything. I should have reported it, should have turned around and headed straight back to the ship. But I didn't. For reasons I still don't fully understand, I shut off my comms and walked straight into the dark. And in that moment, I had no idea. I was about to walk into something that would change everything I thought I knew about life, death, and everything in between. The Hesperin Research Center was a death maze of shattered labs and pitch-black corridors. The air was thick with a violet mist, drifting through the halls like haunted ribbons of smoke. I had to stop 3 times to swap out my oxygen tanks, even though my suit was built to filter every known toxin. Erebus wasn't just dead, it was rotting. I found her in the lowest sublevel, locked inside a biocontainment chamber, sealed behind 7 security doors. Every single one had been destroyed, from the inside, like someone had tried to break out, or maybe tried to keep something in. My flashlight caught the shape of a figure, curled up in the corner. At first, I thought it was a piece of machinery. Her skin gave off a soft, bluish glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. But then she looked up, and I realized it wasn't a thing. It was her, a Hesperin girl. She was chained to the wall by thick energy tethers. Snow-white hair hung down over her face, and her skin, it was laced with cracks, spiderweb lines leaking that same violet mist I'd seen drifting across the planet. "Don't come closer," she rasped. "I'm contagious." I stopped, kept my distance. "I was sent to investigate." "To die like the rest," she said, lifting her head. That's when I saw her eyes, deep violet, glimmering with starlight that danced across her irises. "There's no one left alive on Erebus," she whispered. "Just me, and I shouldn't even be here." "What happened here?" I asked, not moving an inch closer. She gave a broken smile. "I happened. I'm a bioweapon, a virus I spread through emotion." I frowned. "Emotion?" "I emit a kind of bioresonance wave," she explained, her voice growing fainter like every word was draining what little strength she had. "It connects to the part of the brain that processes empathy. When someone feels for me, feels pity, compassion, anything, their cells start to change. They become like me, and then they rupture. Their bodies explode, releasing more toxin. That's what killed everyone?" She nodded slowly, pain etched into every line of her face. "They tried to escape, but it was too late. The waves spread too fast. Only those who couldn't feel empathy survived." And in that instant, I understood. That's why Wilson chose me. It wasn't my combat record, it wasn't my skills, it was my reputation. Dead man's shadow, the soldier who felt nothing. No fear, no hesitation, no heart. A man who couldn't empathize. I heard a soft hiss as I unsealed my mask. The air of Erebus rushed in, sweet and strange, like the dying breath of a flower wilting in the dark. "You're insane," she cried, shrinking back into the wall. "Put it back on. You'll die." I waited for the burn in my lungs, waited for the agony of mutation, for my body to betray me. But nothing happened. I stepped closer. She flinched, panic rising in her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why aren't you dying?" I knelt in front of her, close enough to touch her. The violet mist coiled around me like silk ribbons, but I felt nothing. No pain. No change. "I think," I said, "I can't feel your bioresonance." And in her eyes, I saw it. A flicker of something so small, so fragile. Hope. Like a distant star, barely clinging to the night. That's when I realized a terrible truth. I was the first person she had ever met, who hadn't died just by being near her. And then she whispered something that still haunts me to this day. Does that mean you don't have a heart, or that yours is already dead? The Hesperin Research Center was a death maze of shattered labs and pitch-black corridors. The air was thick with a violet mist, drifting through the halls like haunted ribbons of smoke. I had to stop 3 times to swap out my oxygen tanks, even though my suit was built to filter every known toxin. Erebus wasn't just dead, it was rotting. I found her in the lowest sublevel, locked inside a biocontainment chamber, sealed behind 7 security doors. Every single one had been destroyed, from the inside, like someone had tried to break out, or maybe tried to keep something in. My flashlight caught the shape of a figure, curled up in the corner. At first, I thought it was a piece of machinery. Her skin gave off a soft, bluish glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. But then she looked up, and I realized it wasn't a thing. It was her, a Hesperin girl. She was chained to the wall by thick energy tethers. Snow-white hair hung down over her face, and her skin, it was laced with cracks, spiderweb lines leaking that same violet mist I'd seen drifting across the planet. "Don't come closer," she rasped. "I'm contagious." I stopped, kept my distance. "I was sent to investigate." "To die like the rest?" she said, lifting her head. That's when I saw her eyes, deep violet, glimmering with starlight that danced across her irises. "There's no one left alive on Erebus," she whispered. "Just me, and I shouldn't even be here." "What happened here?" I asked, not moving an inch closer. She gave a broken smile. "I happened. I'm a bioweapon, a virus I spread through emotion." I frowned. "Emotion?" "I emit a kind of bioresonance wave," she explained, her voice growing fainter like every word was draining what little strength she had. "It connects to the part of the brain that processes empathy. When someone feels for me, feels pity, compassion, anything, their cells start to change. They become like me, and then they rupture. Their bodies explode, releasing more toxin. That's what killed everyone?" She nodded slowly, pain etched into every line of her face. "They tried to escape, but it was too late. The waves spread too fast. Only those who couldn't feel empathy survived. And in that instant, I understood. That's why Wilson chose me. It wasn't my combat record, it wasn't my skills, it was my reputation. Dead man's shadow, the soldier who felt nothing. No fear, no hesitation, no heart. A man who couldn't empathize. I heard a soft hiss as I unsealed my mask. The air of Erebus rushed in, sweet and strange, like the dying breath of a flower wilting in the dark. "You're insane," she cried, shrinking back into the wall. "Put it back on. You'll die." I waited for the burn in my lungs, waited for the agony of mutation, for my body to betray me. But nothing happened. I stepped closer. She flinched, panic rising in her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why aren't you dying?" I knelt in front of her, close enough to touch her. The violet mist coiled around me like silk ribbons, but I felt nothing. No pain, no change. "I think," I said, "I can't feel your bioresonance." And in her eyes, I saw it, a flicker of something so small, so fragile. Hope, like a distant star, barely clinging to the night. That's when I realized a terrible truth. I was the first person she had ever met, who hadn't died just by being near her. And then she whispered something that still haunts me to this day. "Does that mean you don't have a heart, or that yours is already dead?" I freed her from the restraints, and we took shelter in the central control room, the only place left with a working air filtration system. She sat curled up in one of the chairs, still keeping her distance, still unsure if I was really immune to her presence. "My name's Alex," I said, breaking the silence. She looked at me for a long time, like she was deciding whether or not to trust me. "Lyra," she finally replied. "They used to call me Lyra." Lyra. The name fit her. Music, light, fragile beauty wrapped in tragedy. "Who are you, Lyra? And why were you down there?" She turned toward the cracked monitors where arcs of static still sparked across shattered screens. "I'm Project Empathia, the Hesperon's final design." I'd heard the stories about the war between the Hesperons and the Vor. The Vor were emotionless, engineered for war. No pain, no fear, no empathy. That's what made them unstoppable. Perfect soldiers with no conscience to slow them down. "You were created to fight them," I said, the pieces clicking into place. Lyra nodded, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "I'm a living virus, a reverse bioweapon, designed to force empathy into those who had none. The idea was to infect the Vor, trigger feelings they weren't built to process. Pain, fear, regret, break them from the inside out. But something went wrong. Everything went wrong." She stood and walked to the window, staring out over the ruins of Erebus. "I didn't just activate the empathy gene, I amplified it, lost control of it. Anyone who felt anything for me, pity, sorrow, even the slightest bit of care, their cells began to rewrite themselves, cloning my DNA until they couldn't contain it anymore," I finished, "and they exploded." She nodded. "I became the glitch in the system, a weapon with no targeting, too dangerous to deploy, too dangerous to exist." I glanced at one of the few functioning consoles, scrolling through fragments of data. "So they locked you away?" "They planned to reconstruct my genome, strip out the error and start over. But before they could..." Her voice trailed off, eyes unfocused, lost in memory. "What happened, Lyra?" I asked gently. She turned to me then, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of her sorrow. And I understood why people died around her. It wasn't just the virus, it was her eyes. Those eyes could break even a heart forged in fire. "There was a scientist," she whispered, voice trembling. "She built me using her own DNA. She was the only one who ever treated me like a person, not a weapon. She called me her daughter." A single tear hovered on her cheek, catching the light and scattering it into a tiny rainbow. "One day, just before they were going to rewrite me, she came to visit. She touched my hand and said everything would be okay, that she'd protect me." Lyra closed her eyes. Her pain etched across her face like a sculpture cracking from the inside. "She was the first person who truly loved me, and she was the first to die." She turned away, shoulders trembling. "After that, chaos. Her cells unraveled. The virus entered the ventilation system, spread across the entire complex. Within an hour, anyone capable of empathy was infected. Within a day, Erebus fell." And then I understood. Lyra wasn't still alive because someone had saved her. She was alive because of guilt. She had locked herself away, trying to contain the disaster she'd become. "My mother was the first to die because of me," Lyra whispered, "because she loved me. That's my curse, Alex. I can only exist in a world without love." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not from her virus, but from her story. Maybe I wasn't as numb as I thought. The days that followed on Erebus passed in a haze of soft, ghostly light. I made the decision not to report Lyra's existence. Not because I didn't trust the Coalition, but because I knew exactly what they'd do. They'd isolate her, study her, and when they couldn't control her, they'd erase her. She was a bioweapon far too dangerous to be allowed to live. We left the research complex and found shelter in an abandoned outpost near the valley's edge. I used every trick I'd learned as a mercenary to turn it into a small fortress: early warning systems, emergency exits, supply caches. I knew it was only a matter of time before the Coalition came looking, once my comms went dark. At first, Lyra kept her distance. She stayed on the far side of every room, her voice barely above a whisper, like she was afraid her virus could travel on sound alone. But slowly, the space between us began to shrink. It started with small conversations. I told her about Earth, about cities lit up like galaxies, endless oceans, the smell of green forests after rain. Her eyes lit up when I talked about rain she'd never seen it, On her world, water only ever fell as snow. Rain sounds like music, she said once, closing her eyes like she could hear it in her mind. I want to hear it, just once. One night while I was fixing the filtration system, she asked me something unexpected. Have you ever been hurt, Alex? I pointed to a long scar down my arm. Plenty of times. No, not that kind of pain, she said, shaking her head gently. I mean here. She touched her chest, I thinking. Yeah, I said at last. A lot. What does it feel like? How do you explain that kind of pain? The pain of watching my mother die slowly from mining sickness. The hollow ache of burying my best friend after a mission gone wrong. The numbness that came after when I realized I couldn't feel anything anymore. It's like a black hole, I said. It swallows everything, light, hope, joy until there's nothing left. Until you're just a shell. Lyra tilted her head. Like the Vor. Maybe, but they were born that way. I paused. I became that way. To survive, she stepped closer. Closer than she'd ever been. You made yourself like the Vor, so you wouldn't have to feel pain anymore. There was something in her voice, something sharp and tender all at once. It caught me off guard. No one had ever understood me like that. No one had ever even tried. That was the moment everything changed. The moment I realized I was looking at a mirror, a creature shaped by loneliness, by fear, by survival, forced to shut down every emotion just to keep breathing. You know, she whispered, sometimes I wonder if I can make the Vor feel again. Maybe I can do the same for someone like you. On our 5th day on Erebus, I noticed something strange. The cracks in Lyra's skin, they were starting to heal. The violet mist around her was thinner, fainter. You look better, I said as we sat sharing a ration pack from my ship. She glanced down at her arm. I feel better. More normal, less toxic. I didn't know what was happening, but I had a theory. Maybe it's because we left the research center, got away from the contamination. Maybe, she nodded, but I could tell she wasn't fully convinced. Over the next few days, the changes became more obvious. The haze over Erebus began to thin near our shelter, and in the dead soil, tiny plants started to grow. Little green shoots breaking through the gray. Then one evening, as we watched Erebus's twin moons rise, Lyra turned to me. Alex, she said, I want to try something. Before I could ask what she meant, she reached for my hand. Not an accidental brush, she took it. Fingers laced through mine. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for pain, for the gas, for death. But nothing happened. No violet mist, no reaction, no collapse. Just the warmth of her hand in mine. I don't understand, she whispered, opening her eyes. There should have been a reaction. You should have. But I'm fine, I said, surprised by the softness in my voice. Maybe you're healing. Lyra shook her head, her eyes bright with something new realization. It's not me healing, it's you. Your presence is neutralizing the toxin inside me. She let go of my hand and picked up a handful of soil. Watch this. She poured it into her palm, focusing. A faint mist shimmered from her skin, surrounding the dirt. Normally, anything touched by that gas would wither and die. But this time it changed. A small green sprout broke through the dirt and bloomed. A silver-petaled flower opened in her hand, glowing under the light of the moons. I don't know what's happening, she said, voice barely a breath. But for the first time since I was created, I'm not bringing death anymore. She looked at me then, eyes filled with hope. And something cracked inside me, like ice breaking after 1,000 winters. Maybe I wasn't just neutralizing her. Maybe she was doing the same for me. I never believed in lasting happiness. When you're a mercenary, you learn the peace is just the breath between battles. And as expected, our peace didn't last. 10 days after I set foot on Erebus, our early warning system lit up. Not one, but 2 ships were entering the atmosphere. The Coalition, I said, staring at the radar. They're here for me. Not just them. Lyra pointed at the second signal, bigger, faster. That's a Vor warship. My heart stopped. The Vor? How the hell do they know about you? They always knew, Lyra said quietly, eyes distant. They're the reason I was created, Alex. And now, they found me. We didn't have time. I grabbed whatever gear we could carry while Lyra downloaded the central archives. We needed to know what both sides were after, and what we found froze the blood in my veins. God, I muttered, scrolling through the decrypted files. Lyra wasn't just a bioweapon. She was a planetary-scale emotional bomb. According to her original specs, she could, under the right conditions, link to an entire species neural network. Connect, then overwrite. The Coalition knows what I'm capable of, Lyra said, her voice shaking. They want to destroy me. They're terrified the Vor will get to me first and flip the process, use me to wipe out empathy across the galaxy. And that's exactly what the Vor want, I realized. They want to turn you into a weapon, to erase every trace of emotion. Lyra nodded, fear rising in her eyes. If they succeed, billions will die. Not physically, but their minds will be rewritten. They'll become husks, new versions of the Vor we had no choice but to run. But where? Every world in the galaxy would be hunting her. My ship, I said. We can get off Erebus, find some backwater planet to hide. Lyra grabbed my hand, her face pale with dread. Alex, I can't leave Erebus. The toxins in my body have saturated this planet's atmosphere. If we board your ship, it could carry the contamination to other systems. But you're stabilizing, I argued. You're in control now. Only near you, she said, shaking her head. I don't know what happens if we leave orbit. What if the distance weakens whatever's keeping me in check? I understood, but we were out of time. We have to risk it, I said. Staying here means waiting to die. We left that night, cutting across dead valleys to the site where I'd hidden my ship. But the Vor were faster than we thought. Just a few hundred meters from the ship, the sky erupted the roar of engines, the scream of metal. Down! I yanked Lyra into a ravine as a laser blast scorched the earth. Vor troops deployed tall, cold, inhuman, moving with surgical precision. They can smell me, Lyra whispered. My DNA gives off a biocompound. They'll find us. I drew my weapon, checked the magazine, not nearly enough to take down an entire Vor unit. Run to the ship, I said. I'll hold them off. No, Lyra gripped my arm. They'll kill you. I just need to slow them down. You're the one that matters, Lyra. If they get you, you don't understand, she interrupted, panic in her voice. If I lose control, if my emotions spike, I could trigger a mass link. Everyone within range who feels anything will mutate instantly. And die, I finished. Like what happened on Erebus. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. But it's more than that. Each infected becomes a new vector. It could spread, Alex, across the stars. Billions overwhelmed by feelings they were never built to handle. It would be an emotional extinction. I've seen horrors in my time, but never anything like this. So how do we stop it? I asked. There's only one way, Lyra said, her voice firm now. I have to sacrifice myself. I can reverse the mutation, collapse it inward. No, I shouted. There has to be another way. There isn't, she said softly, already reading the resistance in my eyes. I can't let them take me. Not the Coalition, not the Vor. It's too dangerous. Just then, a laser blast struck the rock above our heads. Debris rained down, and I pulled her from the collapsing ridge. We ran, ducking behind stone outcrops, racing toward the ship. But they saw us. 3 Vor soldiers broke from the ranks, weapons locked, emotionless eyes tracking every step. No time to think. I shoved Lyra to the side and opened fire. 1, 2, 3 shots. 2 fell. The third was faster. He fired and searing heat lanced through my shoulder. I dropped, blood soaking through my jacket. Lyra screamed, diving toward me. Go! I gritted out. Get to the ship! Launch code is 7-4-9-alpha. But she didn't run. She turned, faced the last Vor soldier, and I saw it in her eyes, something terrible and beautiful and final. Lyra, don't! I tried to rise, pain blurring my vision. I'm sorry, Alex, she said, never looking back. But I can't let you die for me. No one should die for me, ever again. And then I saw it. The cracks on her skin began to glow. The violet mist thickening around her, swirling like a storm. No! I screamed, knowing what she was about to do. She was preparing to trigger a self-detonation, to unleash it all. But that wasn't the end of our story. That was only the beginning of something far greater. With one final surge of strength, I rolled forward, grabbed Lyra by the ankle and pulled her down. The violet mist swirled around us, thick and alive, but I didn't let go. Not like this, I whispered through the fire burning in my shoulder. Not this way, Lyra. Let me go, she pleaded, tears streaking down the glowing cracks on her cheeks. I can save you. By dying? No! I forced myself upright, dragging her with me. If you die, then what do I have left to live for? Her eyes widened at my words, but there was no time to dwell. More Vor soldiers were closing in, and across the ravine I could see coalition troops approaching from the other side. We were surrounded. Back to the ship, I said, pulling her toward cover. Now! It's too late, she said, scanning the ridges. They'll shoot us before we're halfway there. She was right. With my wound, we'd never outrun them. Alex, she turned to me, eyes filled with something deeper than fear. Do you trust me? Yes, I answered, without hesitation. Then listen to me. She grabbed both of my hands. This isn't self-destruction. I just realized something. This connection between your deadened heart and my overwhelming emotion, it's not neutralization, Alex. It's resonance. I don't understand. I can trigger phase 2, she said quickly. A second biological form my creators never imagined I'd reach. Instead of spreading emotion like a weapon, I can unfold it as a wave of rebirth. I searched her eyes for any trace of madness or despair, but all I saw and was certainty. How? I asked. I need your energy, she said. The balance we've created. You have to stay with me, right next to me. And you have to open your heart. Feel, Alex. Really feel for the first time in years. I heard footsteps approaching, weapons cocking. Time was gone. Will I die? I asked. Not out of fear, just truth. I don't know, she said softly. Maybe, but if we don't try, we will die. And if the Vor get me, billions will die, I finished. Okay, let's do it. Lyra stepped close, placing one hand over my heart. Feel, Alex, she whispered. Don't fight it. And I let go. For the first time since my mother died. Since I buried my best friend. Since I became dead man's shadow, I felt. The pain came first, searing, relentless. Every loss, every wound, every memory I'd buried deep enough to forget. It felt like my skin was being torn from the inside out. My knees buckled, but Lyra held me up. Keep going, she urged. Push through the pain. So I did. I reached deeper, and I found it. The warmth of my mother's hug before she left for work. The sound of my friend's laughter echoing in the aftermath of an impossible mission. And strongest of all, the moment I first looked into Lyra's eyes and realized she understood me. In a way no one else ever had. I feel it, I whispered, tears falling freely. I feel everything. Lyra smiled and her body began to glow. Not the poisonous violet, but pure, radiant blue. The cracks in her skin widened, but instead of leaking toxic mist, they shone with blinding light. Alex, she said gently, thank you for teaching me this. Teaching you what? That sometimes the most beautiful pain is the kind we let ourselves feel. And then she embraced me. I felt her body trembling, heating, pulsing with something vast and ancient. I had to shut my eyes from the brightness. I could feel it, this massive surge building inside her. Every emotion she'd buried, every wound, every spark of hope, released all at once. Stop her! I heard a Vor soldier scream. Fire! Came a coalition command. But it was too late. With a final breath, Lyra let go of me and raised both hands to the sky. From her body erupted a wave of pure blue energy, blasting out in all directions. It hit me like a shock wave, knocking me flat against the ground. The wave expanded faster than light racing across the valley, then beyond, until all of Erebus was engulfed in luminous blue. But it wasn't destruction, it was rebirth. Where the wave passed, the ground turned from ash to rich red soil. Green shoots pierced the dirt, called forth by something unseen. The thick, poisoned air became fresh, cool, breathable. I watched one of the Vor soldiers. The wave passed over him, and for the first time in the history of his kind, he felt fear. His face, usually a mask of apathy, twisted in confusion. Then awe. Coalition troops froze, weapons lowered, eyes wide. They watched in stunned silence, and at the center of it all was Lyra, glowing like a star, her body shifting, becoming translucent, as if she were merging with the very energy she'd unleashed. "Lyra!" I shouted, trying to rise, but the wave's force pinned me down. "Don't!" She turned to me, and in that final moment, I saw her smile. A smile without sorrow, without fear. A smile of pure freedom. "This isn't the end, Alec," she said. Her voice didn't echo in the air, it echoed in me. "This is the beginning. For Erebus, for you, for all of us." And then in a final burst of light, she was gone. The blue wave kept spreading, brighter, stronger, until the atmosphere of Erebus shone like a beacon against the dark of space. And then darkness took me. I woke up 3 days later in a coalition medical station. My shoulder had been treated, but there was another kind of pain, deeper own no drug could touch. When I opened my eyes, Commander Wilson was standing at my bedside. "Dead man's shadow," he said, a flicker of surprise in his voice. "Didn't expect you to survive." "Lyra," I rasped, throat dry. "Where is she?" Wilson turned to the window, looking out over Erebus, but not the Erebus I remembered. The sky was no longer stained violet and toxic. It was clear, blue. Gentle white clouds drifted over a world I barely recognized. In the distance, I saw forests rising, not saplings, but towering trees, as if decades had passed in only a few days. "There's nothing like her left," Wilson said. "No trace of Hesperan biology anywhere on the planet." "But she was here," I insisted, struggling to sit up. "She saved this place. She turned the poison into life." Wilson gave me a strange look, half skeptical, half curious. "We don't know what happened. Our scientists are trying to figure it out. But whatever it was, it completely transformed Erebus. This planet, once declared dead, is now growing faster than any ecosystem we've ever studied." "What about the Vor?" "They pulled back," Wilson said, shrugging. "Strangely changed. We captured a few. They're experiencing neurological mutations, developing emotion centers in their brains." He shook his head in disbelief, as if millions of years of evolution reversed in a single moment. I gave a tired smile. Lyra had done what armies couldn't. She'd ended a war by giving the enemy the ability to feel. "We need a full report," Wilson said. "Anything you can remember. Anything that might explain what happened. This could change the course of the entire conflict." I turned back to the window, to the land Lyra had saved. And I realized if I told the truth, they'd try to recreate her, weaponize her, start all over again. "I don't remember much," I lied. "I was injured, lost a lot of blood. There was light." Wilson didn't look satisfied, but he nodded. "Rest up. We'll get you back to Earth in a few days." When he left, I got out of bed and walked to the window. The air on Erebus was warmer now. The clouds were thickening, and then, for the first time in the planet's history, it started to rain. The first raindrops fell onto the once dead soil, forming tiny ripples in the mud. The scent of damp earth filled the air, the scent of new life, a new beginning. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, watching the rain trace down the window. This was what Lyra had always wanted to see. Rain. "Do you see it, Lyra?" I whispered. "You did it." And then through the rain, I heard it. Soft like a breath of wind, but unmistakable. "I see it, Alex. I see everything." I turned sharply, heart pounding. But the room was empty. Had I imagined it? Was it just a lingering echo from her bioresonance? I didn't know. But when I closed my eyes and listened to the rain, I felt her, not as a person, but as a part of everything. Every drop of water, every breath of air, every green sprout on Erebus. The coalition never found any trace of Lyra. Their scientists wrote it off a mutated bacterium, a natural chemical reaction, maybe even interference from an unknown advanced species. No one believed in the story of a Hesperan girl who transformed an entire planet with the power of emotion. No one, but me. A week later, I left Erebus, now renamed Nova Vita, New Life. My ship lifted off in the middle of a gentle rainstorm, and as I looked down, watching the world shrink below me, I saw a new ecosystem unfolding, vibrant, alive. But not all of Lyra stayed behind. That night, in the quiet of my ship's cabin, I dreamed of her. Not as a fading memory, but as if she were really there, standing right in front of me. "You don't have to mourn me," she said, smiling. "I didn't vanish. I just expanded." "I miss you," I admitted. "I know," she said. "And that's the best part, Alex. You can miss me now. You feel it. You're not numb anymore." She was right. Since the day she disappeared, I'd felt everything: pain, regret, but also joy, gratitude, something dangerously close to happiness. "You'll see me again," she said as the dream began to fade. "In the rain, in every new bloom, in your heart, the one you finally let open." I woke up with warmth lingering on my cheek like someone had just touched it. And when I looked out the ship's window, I saw tiny droplets sliding down the glass. Not rain, just condensation from my breath. But somehow, it was enough. I don't know if Lyra still exists, not in the way she once did, but I know this: the greatest gift she left me wasn't the rebirth of a planet. It wasn't peace among the stars. It was this: the ability to feel again. Because as she taught me, sometimes the most precious thing isn't surviving, it's learning how to live. That was 5 years ago. I'm not Dead Man's Shadow anymore. That name died on Erebus with the man I used to be. When I returned to Earth, I turned down every new assignment, handed back my gear, disappeared from the Coalition's radar. Now I live in a small cabin in the mountains of Montana, a place of sudden downpours and endless green forests. I make a living guiding hunters through the woods, though I haven't pulled a trigger since the day I left Erebus. Some folks recognize me. They're smart enough not to ask questions. At night I write everything about Lyra, about Erebus, about how something engineered to bring death became the spark of a new beginning, about how she reached into the dead heart of a broken soldier and brought it back to life. No one reads these journals, no one but me, and maybe that's how it should be. Nova Vitae, world once known as Erebushas, become a symbol of interstellar peace. Scientists from across the galaxy study the miracle of its rebirth. The Vor are no longer a threat, not because they were defeated, but because they changed. Some say they evolved feelings, that they became closer to the other sentient races. Others believe it's just a new tactic. The Coalition still doesn't know what really happened. Their official reports call it a rare natural phenomenon or a biochemical anomaly. No one ever mentions the Hesperan girl who reshaped a world with the power of emotion. No one speaks of Lyra. But I remember, and sometimes that's enough. Lyra kept her promise. She still visits me in dreams, not every night, but often enough to remind me she's still out there. Somehow. Sometimes we just stand together, silently in the rain. Other times she asks me about the world she never got to see. I've never told anyone about these dreams. They'd say I've got neural trauma, PTSD hallucinations. Maybe they're right. I don't care. Last fall, a team of Coalition scientists came to see me. They brought maps, data, and a generous offer to return to Nova Vita and lead a new expedition. "You're the only one who's been there and lived," they said. "The planet's changing too fast. We need to understand why." I declined, because I know what would happen if they ever uncovered the truth about Lyra. They'd try to replicate her, or worse, engineer a version they could control. And instead of life, they'd build weapons. Some secrets are better left buried. That night, I heard her voice clearer than I had in years in the sound of the rain, as if she was warning me, thanking me, or both. I'm still working on the journals each night under the glow of a lantern, not for anyone else to read, but to remind myself it was real. She was real. A few weeks ago, a small package arrived from Nova Vita. No sender, no note, just a small box with a single flower inside silver petal, identical to the one Lyra created from a handful of soil in her palm. A flower that doesn't exist anywhere else in the galaxy. I planted it outside my cabin. It grew fast, unnaturally fast, and on rainy nights, it releases a sweet scent that fills the air. Sometimes I think back to the man I was before Lyra. Cold, number, not really living, just existing. I was my own kind of for a man who'd forgotten how to feel. And then the creature built to bring suffering was the one who taught me how to feel again. We talk about contact with alien life, about meeting beings from distant worlds. But sometimes the most profound encounter isn't with something alien. It's with the part of yourself you thought was lost forever. Some things aren't meant to exist unless you're willing to feel them. Lyra was one of those things. She didn't belong to this world, or any world. Too powerful, too dangerous, too beautiful. But when I opened my heart to her, she touched a part of me I thought had died long ago. No one believes me, but I don't need them to. Because I know one truth. I touched the most beautiful thing the universe had to offer, and I lived. Not just lived, I was reborn. I hear the rain starting outside the cabin, the first drops tapping against the tin roof, playing a familiar rhythm. I set down my pen, close my eyes, and listen. And as always, in the soft patter of the rain, I hear her voice calling my name. Thank you for listening to the story of Lyra and the Earth Soldier, a tale of how pain can teach us to love, and how the strongest emotions sometimes come from hearts we thought were long dead. If you enjoyed this story about love transcending species and the power of humanity to reach those the universe fears, leave a comment below. What do you think really happened to Lyra? Did she vanish forever? Or does her spirit still live on, in the rain, in the soldier's dreams? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next HFY story about the extraordinary strength of the human spirit in a galaxy full of mystery and wonder. I'll see you in the next story.